So sorcery, bewitching, enchanting, casting spells, brewing potions in a cauldron. I mean, this dates as far as ancient times. I even read about a Mesopotamian tablet. It carries an inscription of an unknown woman who, get this, the inscription on the tablet said she gave her victim a life-depriving potion to drink, bathed her victim in a deadly dirt water, and rubbed her victim in destructive evil oil. This is what the Mesopotamian tablet says. But be it a Mesopotamian tablet or a 2,000-year-old scrolls from Serbia that have symbols that resemble talisman, the idea of casting spells and enchanting and conjuring spells just to control people or
To what end?
to manipulate them, that it's manipulation. And they have thought of figurative means to describe manipulation.
And magic back in the day was way more accepted, kind of mysterious. Was it real? Was it not? They didn't know. I mean, we don't know, but we got electricity and light bulbs, and we're looking under the hood all the time, but they didn't have all that. So
it was the inexplicable, and there were those who feared the inexplicable and those who embraced it. There were those who were in control, and anyone who opposed whatever institutions there were, they outed those people as those who could think better or outside the box, but basically a special word for dissenter, a witch, a sorcerer, because you're able to convince people of a truth that's different from my truth.
So you mentioned influence and how it can go by any road, indirectly, directly, and you pulled it all back to the witches of Macbeth, right?
Yeah, the influence goes by any road, whether it is direct or indirect. Like you said, the witches of Macbeth, what we talked about. Like a Scottish lord wins a battle. He doesn't know he's going to be given a promotion, and he meets these three witches who basically tell him that he's going to be the next king of Scotland. And, it wasn't mere prophecy that they said to the Scottish lord. It was an incantation structured as a prediction, just to unhinge a loyal lord's ambition so that he would become a treacherous tyrant in the end. Now, whether this was a spell or incantation or even an eloquent form of manipulation, what was the goal of these witches? To motivate a person to carry out a dastardly deed? What was the benefit of a plan to push a cycle of war, furthering bloodshed and chaos in Scotland? Well, if it was to thrive in the causation of evil, then there is the theory that the witches were doing Satan's bidding. Because going back, what was the unpopular reputation of witches? That they're servants of Satan, that they do the devil's work. That is according to those who, by coincidence, they say that if you dissented with a certain powerful institution in the Middle Ages, you are doing the devil's work. You are the heretic. And of course, the idea that people love stories of good and evil. So with Shakespeare, why not throw in some witches in medieval Scotland to make a medieval tragedy and more like a horror Gothic type story?
And totally palatable.
Oh,
because they were about it. They knew about the witch thing and the spells, and it was easy to, they bought into it. It's a tasty story.
They bought into it. Surely, I mean, going back to the 15th century, that's like 100 years before Macbeth was written, there was a book called Malleus Maleficarum.
That's it.
I think it's called The Hammer of Witches, in which they define witchcraft as a devotion to evil, that a renunciation of Christianity, and they describe really messed up things like sacrificing infants to Satan. And spoiler alert, they didn't cite any evidence. They just wrote
a book.
They just wrote a book, but it was an excellent tool for for those who wanted to maintain power over the populace, to scare them, and not just into submission, but scare them from questioning what they were told, whatever the cult told them to believe. This is what these notions of the witches were what influenced the conception of Macbeth, that they manipulated a Scottish lord to murder his way to a throne and bring about another war as their way of showing devotion to Satan.
And the three witches.
Three of them.
What was that called?
Well, the other thing is the concept of the three witches, it alludes to ancient Greece. In fact, I would say that most of the concept of witchcraft, like most concepts, were derives from ancient times, and not just to Mesopotamia, but even after ancient Mesopotamia, ancient Greece, when the witches in Macbeth, they called upon I think it's Hecate.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering how to say that.
Yeah, Hecate. Hecate.
Greek goddess of magic.
Greek goddess of magic. Yep. And not only did they reference Hecate, they also resembled that of the Fates in ancient Greece. If you have you seen that Disney movie Hercules or Clash of the Titans?
Oh yeah.
There are these sinister-looking, very elderly, cloaked women that are. In the Clash of the Titans, they're called witches. In the movie Hercules, they're called the Fates. But they're basically three mysterious, magical beings that they could see into everybody's fate and determine basically
Destiny.
the destiny. Not so much that they create the destiny; they can just basically see what that destiny is. They were the fates to a certain extent, but thing is, it was more than fates. It's just three women that told prophecy. They were also antagonists in the play. I think it was called the Oresteia. It's a three plays to talk about Agamemnon being murdered and his son avenging him, and that have upset the fates. But going back, I think the idea that Shakespeare picked three witches was the concept of the fates, because by chance they happened to see one of the people that they're foretelling the destiny of, and say, "Hey, just so you know, you're going to become this person. You're going to become King of Scotland. We don't know how that's going to, we're not going to tell you how that's going to be. You're just going to become King of Scotland." And the funny thing is, he didn't even ask him how that's going to happen. He just went along with it.
So they could see the future, but they also were like scheming and antagonizing.
Yeah, like it seems so, because they told him like he's going to be King of Scotland. They also said that his friend's son will eventually be King of Scotland also, but they never it doesn't sound like they said, "Now we advise that you do this the nice way." No, they just basically told him what his destiny is going to be, and then they fade away. Now there's a middle ground, because remember when I told you that one idea is that they want to cause chaos in Scotland if we were to stick to the medieval notions of witchcraft. The other one is the middle ground, that these witches, as Shakespeare identified, were simply enjoying observing the fates of people, and they enjoyed preying on the weakness of others in order to set their ambitions forward to their ominous destinies.
But not to serve Satan.
Not to serve, maybe to serve, like
They're just like imps doing little poopy things all the time.
Yeah, they just yeah,
Shitty moves.
Like they get a kick out of messing with like they know someone's future, and they're just going to tell them outright, just so they
Curveball.
just so it happens, and just to set the dominoes to fall down. I mean, you do have, but then here's the deal. Like, remember when we talked about how the idea of witches can be figurative? Consider Lady Macbeth, Lord Macbeth's wife.
Yep.
He told her about the prophecies, and she was like more enthusiastic about him being king than Macbeth himself. And she really pushed them to stick with the plan of murdering the king that promoted him, just so he can become king. It's like she wanted that destiny to unveil. Now, she's not a witch, but she believed that she manipulated him. She really, she even told her husband, there's a certain quote that she said, she told him to she said, "Screw your courage to the sticking place." She's basically telling him, grow a spine and do what you gotta do. Don't chicken out on this.
So she was a witch, but maybe didn't have the supernatural powers.
Well, she certainly wasn't a witch, but maybe it was a point to say anyone who basically manipulates someone to do the wrong thing has those medieval concepts of witchcraft. Just basically a powerful manipulator or a powerful being that just is devoted to evil or malicious acts. Lady Macbeth is not a witch, but maybe that's one point that was being made in Macbeth, that you don't literally have to practice magic to be a witch. You can be a very convincing or manipulative person.
Effective.
Yeah, effectively manipulative person.
Okay.
I mean, Macbeth even had a bout of conscience, like when he was saying, maybe this is not a good idea. Maybe I don't need to be king. Basically, he was about to stray from what the witches say, but his wife pushed them to do that. She had him will under influence. Now, we can call that manipulation, but if she had him under control with her pushy rhetoric, then that sounds like a spell to me. And, if I remember correctly, Macbeth was written in iambic pentameter, and that's rhythm. Like how witches are known for creating spells that have rhythm that sound like they rhyme. I mean, the funny thing
classics.
is, the classic spells that whenever you make a long spell
In English,
it sounds like it rhymes. It has a certain rhythm to it. The irony is that the play is in a certain rhythm, including when the witches say their spells. So there is a rhyme scheme in Shakespeare's dialogue, but in this perspective, have we not ourselves had our own experiences with dealing with modern sorcerers and enchantresses? I'm not talking about someone that came straight out of a Harry Potter book. I mean, I'm talking about like actual people that have that sort of power.
malicious intent,
People. I mean, whether scheming, whether they have narcissistic issues, when they're not necessarily bad at heart, they might have their own issues that pushes them to do and say things that are malicious and manipulative. But nowadays, when it comes to terminology and therapy, we have a word for that. It's toxic people. And Macbeth could have done what the logicalist thing to do to stay away from toxic people. Maybe he could have stayed as a much respected and revered lord, because he was a loyal lord that saved his king's army in that recent battle and received an amazing promotion. But he could have been happy with that. But instead, he just had to hear a fate of witches. And that got him interested and saying, if I'm going to actually be king in the end, then maybe the king's promotion's not enough. And then just when he was about to realize, maybe this is all wrong, the king's been great to me, and I've been a loyal servant, and the other fiefs, the lords, thanes, respect me and all that, maybe I should quit while I'm ahead. And then his wife manipulated him into doing that. But again, whether it's a toxic person or manipulative person.
But it comes off as so cool and larger than life when you say it's a witch with all the supernatural powers.
Oh, yeah. I mean, even nowadays, like, it doesn't even have to have magical powers. Even nowadays, when we figuratively call someone a witch, when we use that metaphor, we mean to say that you're just basically a malicious person.
Unless you're the good witch.
And that's the thing. There are good witches.
Glinda, right?
Glinda from Wizard of Oz. You can watch the show Bewitched. Harry Potter, the series, to find that there are good witches and bad witches. And like I said, again, it goes back to ancient times, to ancient Greece with their mythology. It doesn't stop with Hecate and the fates.
What's the other one? Do you say it? Circe?
Circe from the Odyssey. Yeah, she's she's the daughter of the sun god Helios and a known ocean nymph named Perse. Perse, Perse. She in the Odyssey, she's a
siren.
Siren. She's kind of like a siren. She lures sailors to her island and she transforms them into animals like wolves, lions, pigs. She gets them, like, as soon as they get on her island, she entertains them with cheese, barley, honeyed wine, and of course her voice. She sings just like a siren. I mean, the sirens are, ocean nymphs. They are, or sea nymphs. They
up on the rocks like an iguana.
Yeah, and which is up on. I just imagine iguanas singing on the rocks.
Because they're cold-blooded.
Well,
there was a word that you used? It looks like pharmacy.
Oh, pharmakeia.
Yeah, what's the deal there?
Well, it's basically Cersei's type of magic. It's a transformation through illusion and mixed drugs,
Wow.
and pharmakeia, the transformation of illusion through.
Slipping someone a Mickey.
So, well, the thing, like, I don't remember how she transformed them. Whether she poisoned their drinks and transformed them into animals, or she conjured up a spell. But here's the thing: Odysseus had to take he had help along the way. He had to take magic herbs given to him by Hermes, who was on his side.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, he alerted and prepped Odysseus of the red flags that were ahead. He's like, "Hey, you're about to meet someone. Don't just. She's full of red flags. Don't openly accept her hospitality and take some of these herbs. They're basically going to make you immune to her magic."
That's heavy.
But again, it's Cersei is a perfect as another example. She lures sailors to her island with the mere idea of transforming them into animals, as if she wants to build her own menagerie.
Yeah, a little work, little farm, couple donkeys.
Yeah, like they all used to be suitors, and in the end, she has her own menagerie. But we think about the metaphor within that. Like, what does that say? That to be allowed to be tricked by hormonal impulses, what people say, physical attraction or whatnot, it brings us to our baser instinct
And hunger.
and hunger. That a bunch of these war-weary, tired sailors want to go home. They meet this attractive, beautifully voiced woman who gives them just awesome food, and they transform into animals. I mean, the things that we crave, that our instincts tell us that we reduce ourselves to our baser instinct for those things. Again, it's not really manipulation, but it's basically one taking advantage of our instincts.
Yep. Strategy.
To be under their control, just like Macbeth. Ambition, and with Odysseus's men, lust, gluttony, or hunger. Again, it's basically preying on weaknesses.
I was trying to remember, you had some Nordic names on the menu, right?
Oh yeah, there's it's Icelandic. This saga of the Volsung and the poetic Edda, Nordic mythology. There are witches in that too. There's
I've heard of these.
Yeah, there's a character named Grimhildur. I hope I pronounced that right. Grimhildur. She's a sorceress. Now apparently there's this prince named Sigurd. He was going to marry. He was going to marry Brynhildr, who's a Valkyrie, and Sigurd. He's a descendant of Odin, and he already has his heart set for this Valkyrie named Brynhildr. But the sorceress Grimhildur, her kingdom is basically dying, and a guy like Sigurd marrying her daughter Gudrun would basically save her nation. So when Sigurd was sleeping, she got him. I'm sorry, I don't know if he was sleeping or not, but she got him to drinking a potion that would erase his memory of Brynhildr, the woman he was actually in love with, and to get him to marry Gudrun. Again,
Pharmakeia.
no, pharmakeia is when you transform people.
Oh, okay.
There's another pharma word when it comes
When
to.
you slip somebody drugs.
Well, like in this pharma word is a type of the idea of using drugs to manipulate people's minds, to basically prey on their minds. But anyways, that's another negative example of witches. Again, it falls into the manipulative category, and we're just talking about those who conjure spells, those who enchant. That's the basic notion of that we're addressing.
The template for that kind of human.
Well, the thing is, like in every single pattern, it just forms into different forms of manipulation, which something that can be relatable nowadays. Just a matter of what gender or what sex. It's manipulate people on both sides.
What era? What culture?
Well, it repeats throughout the eras and throughout the cultures.
But whatever they're in, their little culture is going to have a little outlet for that. Here's our story. We believe in magic, the unexplained, or maybe straight up just political motivations.
Well, the unexplained that's automatically called magic. It's all inexplicable, and the magic, it can finally be understood. It becomes science. It falls under the category of science. I mean, and the thing is, like, science in Latin means knowledge, scienza. So basically, once you have knowledge, understanding of what you don't know, it is a science. And in those days, whatever you don't understand, it has to be magic or providence. And of course, anyone who practiced magic that others call providence, well, you're trying to imitate the gods, or trying to imitate our God. You must be a witch. You must be a dissenter. The funny thing is that most of these examples I used, they're different examples of manipulation, but whether it's Macbeth or Odysseus's men, for some situations, they're actually what do you call? They're actually the fault of part and fault of that person. They allow themselves to be manipulated, or they get tricked. They let their ambition or their baser instincts get the best of them. Of course, being with Circe is a different situation, or with Grimhilder, what's his name? Sigurd. But then there are exceptions to the negative reputation. And again, it's a Shakespeare play. It's called The Tempest. And it talks about a sorcerer named Prospero. So Prospero was a nobleman, and he got betrayed by his brother and his neighbors, and he got exiled with his daughter to an island. When he got to the island, he found a book of spells, and he learned a book of spells, and he became a magician or a sorcerer. And the first thing he did, the island had like a terrible force controlling. I forgot the name of that force, but he basically, using his magic, he got rid of the evil force that enslaved the island. So basically, all the creatures on the islands were in debt to Prospero, and apparently he was respected on the island. And then, by change of luck, he sees a ship. Years later, his daughter's a teenager, I think, and he sees a ship in the distance, and the ship is carrying the very guys that betrayed him, plus the one nobleman who actually saved him from getting killed. And he basically creates a storm, a tempest, and it gets the ship onto the island. And then he basically uses his powers and the spirits and the animals of the island to separate the parties that survived and basically mess with them. But he also gets the son of his enemy to meet his daughter. They fall in love, and Prospero confronts his treacherous brother, his enemy, and the guy, and he actually pardons them. He forgives them, and he returns back to his homeland. His enemies is now his friend because they appreciate his mercy and his generosity, and he gives up magic. So that's an example of a person who uses magic for good. There are other examples, but again, it's the same concept that just because one knows magic doesn't mean that
Bought up or caught up in Satan and all that hubbub.
exactly
It's
like
evil.
just because you have magic doesn't necessarily make you evil. Now, the concept of magic can equal with the concept of power. Power doesn't necessarily always corrupts. It takes the character of the person, whether or not they're can be corrupted or not. I remember, remember what I told you that science in Latin means knowledge, scienza. Scienza potenza est. Knowledge is power. If you understand the way things work, then you have the knowledge of it. That in itself is power. So again, but power can be corruptible. Power can be used for good benefits or bad. Prospero is an example of that. But it's rooted in ancient deities. The idea of powers even goes beyond the concept of power. In Celtic mythology, you have the Dagda. He's the most powerful of the Celtic gods. He's credited for making the fields of Ireland green. Whenever he grew trees, they always bore fruit. He had a pig that was always roasting, so he would never grow hungry. He had a harp that he can change seasons and the emotions of humans. He even had a club that can kill someone with one blow and yet bring them back to life with the other end. And he even had an enchanted cauldron. It never emptied, and he didn't need spooky spells like the three witches said in Macbeth. Again, but why a cauldron? And why the concept of this Celtic god who's basically has massive powers of fertility, fruit that
Cornucopia kind of.
yeah, cornucopia type of power, because I mean he had this the cauldron. You know, people say, well, that's where the witches brew their food. The cauldron is was a household item.
The
It's
stew.
the stew. That's where you make your food. That's where you make your medicine. The cauldron was a symbol of his magic. It's a source of living for domestic life. It's basically a symbol where the essentials of living can come from. These are godlike feats of awe that are repeatedly accomplished in stories of people who cast spells. They use magic cauldrons and power to give themselves everlasting nutrition and nourishment. And how odd that these magical traits, minus the cauldron, are similar to a Christ.
Because he performed things that were way beyond science in the stories.
Yeah, he fed many people loaves
That's right.
of
The
fish.
bread and the fish.
The bread and the fish easily conjured up. Now, again, the figurative translation is that he fed them knowledge. He taught them. That's what he fed them. But again, the fact that they wrote down the loaves and the fish, again, a person who is capable of creating that sort of magic, and yet many years before Jesus, the Celtics thought of a god that was able to do that as well, or him being able to raise the dead or defy the laws of nature. It's these concepts of magic just keep on passing along, and they influence because previous arts influence future arts. Every symbol derives from something else.
So there's commonalities and some themes like what immortality, safety forever because your crops are always coming in, or you can get over on people because you have that advantage. And didn't you have some more Prometheus?
Prometheus, the thing is, he wasn't even a god. He was a titan. And yes, what he did was taboo. It goes to the basics of, mere mortals unlocking the magical secrets that bend every aspect of nature, replicating the power of gods. And this was considered taboo, medieval and ancient times. Prometheus was a famous lesson of this tattoo. He was an immortal, he was a titan, and he was a titan that defied the gods because he gave the secret of fire to humans. And with that secret to fire, they were able to mimic the achievements of the gods. But again, it's like the concept of that it's taboo for a person to achieve the knowledge, whether they work for it or they somehow gain it, that now they have something that's similar to what they have labeled as the gods or God, to be able to practice that sort of magic, whether it's engineering or scientific research. The funny thing is that taboo also goes in monotheistic cultures. I think it was the second or third commandment. It warned about posing or acting like God. Thou shalt not take thy Lord God's name in vain. But not just saying the God's name in vain, but basically idolizing.
Worship a graven image.
Or self-worship, even. To think that you all can be equal to him. Basically saying that because you are lessening the value of God, by saying, I can be as equal as him. Vanity, which wouldn't surprise me that Thomas Aquinas listed pride as a mortal sin, or the deadly sin. Needless to say, to have the power of the gods or God, or merely the power to control nature, is an alluring skill set. So can we blame the witches? Can we blame anyone for being attracted to that sort of power? We're not living the same way as we lived in the Middle Ages or in ancient times. We have slowly advanced in scientific achievement. If we demonstrate any of our technologies today to people back then, they would call it magic. Well, then apparently we have attained something that to them only gods could achieve. So would those people who can create these technologies or have created these technologies or even understand how these technologies work, would they therefore be considered witches? Back then, they were treated as outcasts. They were deemed unnatural, having to dare challenge God or the gods and the rules of nature. Yet who truly has legitimacy in establishing the rules of nature? Well, I mean, we have rules of science There are rules in biology, laws of biology and physics and chemistry that we abide by because it helps us understand nature. But are there rules to say, truly any rules that say how far we can go with technology or not? Naturally, we don't want to be the malicious so-called witches that are bent on destruction. How would a witch differ from those who discovered to transmit energy wirelessly, or those who split the atom, or those who learned how to fly, or those who can concoct a deadly force through powder and fire, or creating everlasting sustenance through chemistry, devising plagues that can change civilizations? As when dealing with a witch, everything has a price, everything has a catch. We have achieved so much in science, and we have used science for good and for bad. And when I mean I'm just saying humans in general. What is a witch? Someone who transcends the natural order, has a closer understanding to nature's structure. Almost any tale of witches, whenever someone has that sort of power, there's always some sort of consequence with it. You know, remember when I said that religious institutions feared having such broad insight and knowledge? It was against their plan. It was against their way of controlling.
I mean, holding back technology and learning and all that good stuff.
Holding back even the smallest example of education, reading and writing.
Yeah.
Every area in Europe had its own vernacular. That not everybody spoke Greek and Latin, and certainly not everybody could read Latin. And Latin was the language that was in written texts. Latin was written it was only something.
It was magic.
People in the Middle Ages unable to read because they couldn't read Latin, because only those who could be educated, those who were wealthy enough, or those who joined the church, were trained to read or had the opportunity to read. Again, these books were not written in the vernacular. It wasn't until Martin Luther, he wrote the first Bible in the German language. He had to translate it from Latin and Greek to German. And that made the Bible accessible to people. And it was, again, considered inappropriate to do such a thing, to make the Bible linguistically available to people so they know what the preachers are reading. Because why? Because that was what they used to control people. That was one of the way, the concept of fear, the fire and brimstone. Manipulation. Yep. And that's
magic.
We should be so appreciative of the Enlightenment. I mean, the Enlightenment would not have been possible were not for the Protestant Reformation, because that was like the first major sting to religious institutions, that they started doubting their potency. Now, there were Protestants that had similar misgivings with science and certain truths about nature, but eventually, by I think it was the 17th century, we had Descartes, we had Newton and Galileo, we had philosophers and scientists who were not restrained.
Thinking outside the box.
They were allowed to think outside the box. Now, Galileo, unfortunately, was in a country that was still stuck in that medieval mindset. But they're like, in England, Newton had that freedom. And back in the Middle Ages, is that they always told people to be wary of Lucifer, the bringer of light. That he's a master of lies. That this was the power that the institution feared to be held, so they gave it a special name. So they basically wanted people to avoid enlightenment, because if you were to follow enlightenment, you would be questioning the power of God as the institution says so. Or was it to question the power of the higher-ups in control of the institutions, who misinterpreted Scripture to control less educated minds and carry out their own evils? Now, they say that Satan was a master of lies. Only a master of lies would be preaching a book that's supposed to talk about love and peace while sending people to go to war.
Oh, so it's backwards.
Yeah, or quoting the Testament while outing anyone who disagreed, sending them to torture through the Inquisition. People needed the Great Enlightenment in order to break from that institution's, dare I say, spell. And anyone who disagreed with them, who called them out on the hypocrisy. Because again, what is a witch according to them? A witch is a rebel. A witch seeks and uses power of knowledge. Yes, a witch can use that power for evil as well as for good, but the extent of the witch's power is defined by their erudition, their cunning, their resourcefulness. It all depends on which lens you want to see it. Another one I didn't mention was this one comes from Irish lore and
Ah,
the Waterloo sparkling water. This comes from Irish lore and Scottish lore, the Banshee. It derives from Woman of the Fairy Mound. Now, the thing about the Banshee is that she can shriek ominous predictions. They basically let you know that someone you love is about to die. And
did you say shriek?
shriek, like screaming loudly.
Oh,
In fact, I think that's what the Banshee is best known for. Basically, a supernatural being known for being incredibly loud, or at least from what I've read. I think it goes back to Celtic mythology, if I'm not mistaken. And I've seen that word being used multiple times to compare loud people. You're screaming like a banshee.
and Sushi and the Banshees.
Uh,
It's a band, right?
is there some?
Yeah, they're good.
I never heard of them. I know that there's a Martin McDonagh movie called the Banshees of Inish. I completely forgot. It's with Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson. There's even a DC villain named Banshee, known for being able to scream so loud that she can be able to cause physical effect.
That's cool.
And here's the thing about witches is that they seem to always fall under one of the three guises. It's either an old crone.
Thought you were gonna say hag.
Oh, hag, crone, yeah.
Stereotypical witches in three divisions.
Yeah, the three stereotypical divisions, the three common guises. It's either,
Okay.
Yeah, the old hag, the beautiful young woman,
Okay.
or the mother-like figure. It's always one of
All
those
right.
three. And banshees appear in one of those three. And again, it also comes from Scottish lore. The thing is, the Irish, the banshee, it's a woman of the fairy mound. In Scottish lore, it's the little washerwoman. They're loud, they lament, and yet they also give you a heads up. We talked about, like with Macbeth, the witches make predictions, but the funny thing is that those predictions happen because they could have been avoided if they just didn't do anything to follow that path. Macbeth deliberately followed a path that would eventually fulfill the prophecy, but again, it's making a prediction such a terrible thing. Would a person want to know if someone they know, someone that they love, is about to die, or would they rather be blindsided for it? Because
Yeah, it seems like you're putting upon somebody delivering all that. I
people,
don't know. Did people get upset when witches told them that kind of stuff?
that's the
Have you
thing,
read about that?
banshees are actually held in a negative outlook from what I've learned from people from Ireland that I know that I've spoken with.
Oh,
But they're most associated with a negative
okay.
reputation that someone's screaming out, someone that you know is about to die, someone that you love is about to die. I mean, and then there's either those that they want to know so they can brace for it or try to prevent it, or there are those who say, no, I'd rather let it blindside me, like come at me out of nowhere.
And I guess the setting, if your town was all against him and someone started barking out and you really believed it, could freak you out.
Who often would believe a prediction? Cassandra, again, going back to mythology, specifically the Iliad and the Odyssey. Cassandra was the sister of Paris and Hector, daughter of Priam, and she was cursed, I think, by Apollo that she could see what was going to happen. She had foresight. She could predict what's going to happen.
Precog.
But she could not get anyone to believe her. She can predict things, but people would not acknowledge that her predictions. And then, so that's basically her curse. That Cassandra,
That they didn't believe or they didn't acknowledge.
they acknowledge her saying it, but they did not believe her. And then that's her curse, that no matter what she tells people is going to happen, they will not believe her. And then she has to see the chaos ensue.
That's just normal life for everybody else.
But that's where we get to normal life. I mean, I think if someone makes a prediction, I would be skeptical. It depends on the prediction. If you tell me something that a certain politician is going to do, I can say, yeah, that might be something they might do. But if you make a prediction that I won't believe and then it happens, then next time you make a prediction, yeah, I might be inclined to believe you. But with Cassandra's case, her curse is that they won't believe her
That's
at all.
weird because it just makes you think, she got up in their face and told them some stuff, and they looked the other way, or maybe she didn't know it. She was all mumbly, or it fell on their ears different.
I think it falls on their ears
It's a
different.
curse.
It's a curse.
There it is, the magic.
But it's like
supernatural.
I think it's like the opposite of the boy who cried wolf. He lied so
The
many
wolf
times.
who cried boy. Wait, no. Oh,
Think about it. The boy who cried wolf. He lied so many times people stopped believing him. Cassandra, no matter how it makes a prediction, she won't be believed, and she is in fact telling the truth. But again, here's another example of predictions. Here's one. There's even a witch in Old Testament or the Torah. This specifically is called the Witch of Endor. You know that the Israelites made a covenant with God, right? That they would follow God's commandments and God's expectations. Sorry.
And he made one with them with the rainbow.
So what?
That it's a sign that he wouldn't flood them out again.
Oh, with the Noah's Ark.
Yeah. I'm just too sensitive. It's just hubbub. But
God would never do something like that again.
It'll be fire next time.
I mean,
something like that.
Well, remember, the story of Noah precedes that of Moses, and God did release 8-10 plagues unto Egypt to force the Pharaoh. The Witch of Endor is after Exodus, during Kings. The supposed first king of Israel was King Saul. And one of the conditions of the covenant was that Israelites cannot consort with anyone, any medium, anyone who practiced the supernatural.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
And because basically, remember the second commandment was that thou shalt not have other...
worship other gods before me, or
the first commandment is, I am the Lord thy God, thou shalt not have strange gods before me. The second commandment is, thou shalt not take the Lord's name in vain. Even by acting as someone that's acting like God.
That's the scariest part of it. That gives them power. That's the whole thing, is they're humans with supernatural power.
To be able to hold God's power would be similar to that of taking God's name in vain.
Foot sweeping the church.
Foot sweep, or according to the religious institution, you're foot sweeping the respect for God. And with the first commandment was, thou shalt not have strange power before me. Well, if you consort a medium, a witch, or anyone to solve your problems instead of having faith, that right there is a violation of that condition.
It's the equivalent of having a subscription or not, right? You got to have a tether. They got to get you in the door. You can't be like consulting anywhere else, because
exactly. Like you go to, it's either I'm your guy or I'm not.
Yeah.
Since they've always been at war, they've always been fighting. Well, and this was after Saul banished David, I believe. Saul saw a massive army before him, and he was not sure if he can be able to win this. Now, Saul, and could be a morality tale of faith. One might say if Saul had faith, he would not consult any medium for help to fight this battle, because Saul has won battles when he was outnumbered. But anyways, Saul had doubt, and Saul went to this witch known as the Witch of Endor, and asked the witch if she could conjure up the dead body of the prophet Samuel to get advice from Samuel. Well,
that would be impressive.
And he was breaking his own law by doing that, because the laws of Israel followed that of the covenant. And so he was breaking his own law. And he told the witch, don't worry, I will not have you persecuted, because I am in fact the king. So you don't have to worry about, a double standard. So she did what she said. As you said, she conjured up the dead. She conjured up Samuel. And Samuel told Saul, there's no point in doing this, because you are going to lose that battle. And Saul did lose the battle. He died in that battle, and that was the end of Saul, the reign of Saul. He basically broke God's covenant. He broke the deal with God for no reason, because he was hoping that the prophet Samuel will give him some advice or some...
But the reason he was scared, he was doubting.
He was doubting. He was scared.
His faith got thin.
But here's the funny thing, is that rulers have gone to prophets hoping or thinking that prophets speak on behalf of whatever gods they worshipped. No different from pagans consulting oracles, or Vikings consulting seers, or the Greeks having the fates. Almost every culture had their own sources of fortune tellers. Now, I'm not saying that prophets claim that they could speak for God. That prophets did not claim that they can look into the future, but that's how kings have treated prophets. They say, "Hey, I know you claim to speak for, you claim to carry the word of our God. What do you think God would want if I do this, or do you think is God going to support us in this battle?" It's the same outlook. So basically, not having faith in that case.
But that's in the Saul's case, and in I can say like a Mormon's kind of case, they don't want you mess with nobody else. And the Vikings seem like they'd be like, "Who are your gods?" But some institutions, some religions have real hard, boundaries of where you can explore and think outside the box or wonder about things. It's like you can't wonder.
Yep.
Yeah.
With pagans, including Vikings, they basically had a free market of religion. You pray to which god you're the most loyal to. You believe the gods are responsible for the forces of nature, and you hope that you can cut a deal with them. And then there are people who claim they are the link to the gods, oracles or seers or whatnot, and people would go to them for. And of course, the frauds would basically give a speak in terms of riddles to not be held responsible. Like if a general goes up to a fortune teller and the fortune teller says, "I see a general victorious in an army." "Oh, that's going to be me." And then they lose the battle and they say, "I never said it was you. I just said I saw a general victorious in the army."
I can see that.
But fortune tellers or seers or what have you, just like the witches of Macbeth,
Sears Roebuck.
they're considered.
Sorry.
I see shoes in your future.
Better call Saul. Okay. So, but this was just mostly about how ingrained the witch thing was, and that story right there seems like it would keep everybody in line that came after that,
Yeah, it was a morality tale to let people know. See, Saul lost faith in his God, and he found out the truth that there's no point in raising Samuel, so you should always stick with your faith. You cannot rush for spoilers. You cannot be the person who's streaming a thriller on Netflix and then pause because you want to see the end of the suspenseful moment to see how it turns out. You just have to lock in for the ride,
Yeah.
and trust that the pilot at the helm, your God, knows what he's doing. In my head, another type of witch would be the shapeshifters.
Those are cool.
Yeah, they're the ones who can basically transform. And I think my favorite shapeshifter has to be Morgan Le Fay. Morgan Le Fay was known to be a shapeshifter. Another example is in the North Sea at the Orkney Islands in Scotland. You have rocky coast, crashy waves, short, cold winter days. And it is still a habitable place for those who make their living from the sea. And many lost their lives succumbing to the force of the sea. And it has all the characteristics of a common supernatural tale. And the reason why I bring this up, because it's one of the spots that people have long said that they have spotted a type of shapeshifter called Selkies.
Ooh.
Not selfies,
Yeah.
Selkies. 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 Now, Selkies are basically shapeshifters with an emphasis on seals. They are basically not mermaids. They're basically these beings that are seals, and when they get on the rocks, they shed their seal skin and become human. Now they can be, charming, attractive men or beautiful women. I know said that they're
adults. They come out
adults.
as adults.
Yeah,
okay.
they come out as adults, and they say they come out during moonlit nights on the rocky shore, shedding their seal skin, and for the mere purpose of dancing on the rocks in their human form. Now, they don't discard the seal skin. It's not like they take off the skin and toss it, because they eventually want to become seals again, get the skin back on, and go back into water.
So it's in a pile somewhere, or they just manifest it?
Well, they just basically shed their skin, leave it there, have their fun as a human, and then when it's time to get back in the sea, they become seals again by putting on the skin. They cannot, if they lose the skin, then they are stuck as being human.
Oh, okay.
And there have been tales of humans who see the Selkies and they take the skin, especially the men, just to keep the attractive women at bay. But what is the meaning of the Selkie? I mean, you're not a seal and you're not a human. You're both. But the duality is the conflict of identity. It's not so much that Selkies represent those who do not know their own identity. It's just those who wish to not be a singular identity.
Are they
And
troublemakers? Sorry.
not that what I've read about Selkies, they're not troublemakers. I know there are tales of troublemaking mermaids who will grab men in the seas and feed on them, but I haven't heard. I could be wrong.
So they're not disruptive like the other witches that you just.
No, not
Okay.
disruptive. These are just private shapeshifters who want to experience, who have one, who want to enjoy two different identities. The symbol of the duality. Actually, that just reminds me of another example of the shapeshifters, the werewolf, right? I was watching the Lon Chaney Wolfman last night, and with Claude Rains. Claude Rains plays the father of Larry Talbot, the famous Wolfman, and he tells him that the werewolf is, again, a symbol of the duality of man, that a man being able, having an identity, but is able to become something else at the same time. And he says that that represents the psychological nature of people, that we have a self. There is a self in the human nature, but that self is not limited to one identity, that we can be various things. Now, I'm not talking about children who say, like, oh, I'm Batman this year, and then I'm going to be a super agent the next year. It's
What is
more
it like? Transcendence, like achievable things.
well, I think it's okay with Selkies. It's more of a spiritual thing, but the point that was being made in the movie, The Wolfman, is more of a psychological thing, that it applies to anybody. That there's that which we strive to be, that who we are, and that which sometimes we act and people see it and we do not see it ourselves. It's basically, and we interpret
wow.
that through metaphors. We interpret that through archetypes, or the archetypes influence us, that our identity, like Carl Jung, the famous psychoanalyst, said, that our identity is consists of the archetypes that influence us. We talked about the Malleus Maleficarum. We talked about Macbeth.
Witch's hammer.
The Witch's Hammer. Yep. We talked about different historical and literary examples that show the negative aspects of witches. We've analyzed about how, the metaphor behind the witch, that on one hand they were those who opposed tyranny were labeled as witches, but on the other hand there have been people create tales of such evil beings with power. I mean, again, there are two sides of the legend, and the reason why I brought that up is because what I wonder is, like, where do the negative examples of witchcraft originally come from? Because we also talked about Hecate and
Scapegoating.
Circe. Scapegoat. Oh, that's the thing.
That's it. You're a witch. We proved it.
Well, first you create the story of the witch. You create the story of
the hype.
The hype of the witch. Yeah.
To get people riled up, like there could be somebody we might have to do away with.
Oh yeah.
Or deal with harshly.
Yeah. Well, no. Yeah, just so we talked about that. People who are against the interests of a powerful group were labeled as these monsters that were invented in tales to frighten people, that practices magic and has devoted their life to dark forces. Where did it start off?
And is really nebulous and not understood, so it's super vague.
Yes, because they're
easy to fear.
It's nebulous because where did this negative reputation start? And it has ancient origins, because witches were
scapegoats.
Well, again, scapegoats were used to explain plagues
or to get rid of somebody that was rocking the boat politically, or their ideas, or
people rocking the boat.
The tribe is offset by this one person, and they'd be like, okay, she might be a witch. Let's angle it up.
Well, yeah. In fact, even Socrates, a philosopher,
Socrates,
he wasn't called a witch, but he was basically found guilty because, even though Athens basically had a massive downfall, became this prestigious city-state and became a basic joke in the Peloponnesian Peninsula, even defeated by the Spartans. And but again, before all of that, it was basically mismanagement of the government, of the oligarchy, of aristocrats that failed the Athenian state.
And he was a scapegoat?
He was a scapegoat because he kept on criticizing the government's failings. He kept criticizing basically the mistakes that the government was making. So they decided to blame it all on the very guy who was pointing out the errors.
That's good.
But again, like witches, in medieval times, you just call that person a witch because you dare question the establishment. the idea of witches was like the idea of this monstrous being that joins dark forces was not, was not something that was that came with the religious the Egyptian deities or the Greek deities, because again Hecate and Circe were technically witches, but they weren't like this flying on the broom type, eating children, boiling in cauldron. From what I've read, that there's this poet, a very good poet from Roman times. He lived during the times of Nero. His name was put on the list of people who were accused of conspiring against Nero, including the writer Petronius. But anyways, Lucan, Lucan, he wrote of a witch called Erictho, Erictho, Erictho. Let's go to Erictho. This was one of the earliest descriptions of a person who collected body parts, specifically on the battlefield, enjoyed eyeballs,
Oh, witchy, gruesome stuff.
which includes some eating children,
All the
using
things.
herbs to cast spells.
Oh, classic witch. You're saying this is the origin of all the good.
When we wonder where they started creating this idea of the witch,
Okay.
the person who basically goes against the tenets of Christianity, a person who's consorts with Satan and all that. We talked about Malleus Maleficarum. We talked about the books and the people in charge of religious institutions who created these as a way to have some sort of standard and scapegoat to convince people why bad things are happening or who to blame.
Manipulation tools.
And it's always going to be their number one scapegoat is always going to be the one who questions or who practices against what the institution wants people to conform to,
and maybe the gentlest ones.
The gentlest ones can be also the intellectuals. Again, Age of Enlightenment saved most of Europe for that. It's always going to be those who appear as outcasts, or those, even if you're a hermit living in the woods and odd things are happening in the community near you, you might get the blame.
Like a big bubble up of like spicy, fiery human culture that goes through like the filter of its time and bubbles up with these stereotypes and stories and things that people can grab onto, like a framework, and be like, okay, this is how we see it. This is what's going on. And
this is how we see it.
Yeah, just the same heat that we got these days, but through a different filter, old times and all that, and way less like no one was holding up a camera being like, I'm going to show everybody.
Yeah, this is basically what was written. That's our closest resource. We have to pick up all the tales, all the historical recordings, and just put it together. Because again, there are no eyewitnesses.
It's us. It's a humanity, like a cool, like reflection, like what we're dissecting. Kind of, it says a lot.
Well, I've always said that literature, in particular, looks into the soul of history, because literature shows you how people thought and felt and believed. History gives you facts, gives you labels,
okay,
and gives you names. Literature and the arts gives you the personality of a certain historical period. You look at a Monet painting. Oh, so that was once. That was a style of painting and feeling of certain people in France during that period. But as I said, there were no witnesses. Well, there were witnesses in history, but how reliable were those witnesses? Even ancient texts that described emperors and kings. You really think a person's going to write negative things about a king while alive? These historical resources are not 100% reliable up to a certain period.
Yeah, and it's all like even 911 compared from today to the 70s, way different. It kind of be quick now, and it's more, but all the way back in ancient times and the Bible times, what 911 or what he said, she said, and what's at stake, and how quick stuff happens, and the balance of power. And if you're just a peasant, it's probably easy to get rocked, squished.
Easy to get rocked, squished, and then be given a label as an outcast. And for some reason, nowadays is don't go near that person, they're weird. Back then is don't go near that person, she's a witch.
Yeah, we're gonna peel them in 2 days. They're done.
But But again, we no longer use those labels. Again, what makes a witch? We cannot wholesomely. I mean, it depends
Scapegoat.
on whose perspective. The ones who scapegoat and create this horrific creature, or you believe a witch is one who just knows more than the others and doesn't care to conform, or you're just a person who enjoys literature and reading about such tales but knows better than they're not real.
But all those cool commonalities, it says like we kind of need a framework or a reference, maybe like we got to have a something like that so we can
Yeah,
figure life out. You
or a
know, the way
symbol.
humans process stuff, they got to have something that's like, here's something that's the trickster, not to be trusted, does all these nasty things, and it carries gross stuff around, and maybe it wields supernatural power. Like maybe it's like a default for these Homo sapiens with our frontal lobe and all the what's going on, and we got to make stuff like that to kind of
That's true.
group figure things out. I don't know.
Though there are those who learn from example that to explain ethics or guidelines or
That's good.
would be difficult. So you create a symbol, you create a certain fictitious being that say this is what you should not be following.
And you can share minds, you can group think about something just through like a story and hype it up and get the emotion, and it sticks.
But it sticks. But it also changes because that so-called example that people did not want to, that leaders and patriarchs did not want to follow. Then you also have the changing mindset of saying, well, why do you not want me to follow that? What is it about the witch or the communal anomaly
Especially in the modern
that makes it an
time,
anomaly? So,
like especially these days, everybody wants to know, like, people aren't scared to look into it, like to sniff it.
well, yeah. Nowadays, we're not scared to investigate, learn, because the world that we live in is far more safer for us to have beliefs than back in the Middle Ages.
And we've seen all the discovery of science, and we're like, maybe there's something to it. Let's check it out.
It hurts. No, it hurts. It doesn't hurt to be curious. Well, it hurts. The only people it hurts is those who don't want you to learn, who don't want you to find out information that would.
Oh, that's a mouthful
Yeah.
right there. You just said that's it.
So we're like the archaeologist, this English archaeologist once said, we're all Greeks. Well, then we're also all witches. We have our duality. We have the knowledgeable and non-conforming type, and then we also have the sorry, and then we also have our own dark side. I
And the
think
thing
that
we act out, who we are, who we think we are, who other people's, what we're doing, we don't know.
well, that's what I like about Romance of the Silk is that you know you don't have to be a certain identity that your community wants you to be. You can be what you want to be, and that is not something that you can tell people back then because everyone had dead set expectations. And of course, you when to get into those expectations, well, we know what you were called then. But now, we all have our separate identities. We all are witches in our own way. It depends on what side you want to show. You could either be Sherlock Holmes and you use your knowledge for good, or you can be Moriarty and you use your knowledge to exploit and take advantage. It's really based on the side of your nature that you wish to reveal. That's how I see it.
It's very cool. Thank you.
Thank you, T.
It was cool.
But I'm going to do this again.
Yeah. What's next on the docket, man?
Let's see. Well, I'm going to finish this video up, put it in edit. Well, actually,
I mean, next subject.
if you're listening to this on YouTube, you already know it's been put up.
Yeah. We're in the future.
Well, I'd like to talk about. I'd like to change up. I don't want to stick to one certain topic. I like to change around. I'll let you know.
Okay.
See if we can. I found. Sorry, I'm just garbling here.
I know you got a list.
Yeah, I do. So many things to talk about. No, we have. We talked about. We wanted to talk about the Grateful Dead, right?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Well, let me see what we can
Conjure up.
we conjure up.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me, T. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
All right.
All right.